Hey YouTube, how's it going? In this video, I'm going to be discussing 10 things that you should avoid when traveling or moving to China. To see a list of these 10 things, look at the description down below. Anyways, let's get started. Okay, the first thing you should avoid is confrontation. So if you ever put in a situation where you and a local maybe get a little bit riled up, you want to avoid that situation under all circumstances. So you have to treat the situation as in you are a visitor coming to China. Whether you're living or traveling here just for leisure, you are a visitor. Unless you have like a green card or been living here many years, everyone's going to consider you a visitor. So anytime you confront a local and something gets physical and they start bringing law enforcement around, as a foreigner, you will always be wrong here. Another thing you should do is don't easily take offense. So there are a lot of Chinese here that haven't seen foreigners maybe their whole life or just never talked to one in person. They may ask you straightforward questions. What I mean by that is I took a taxi once to work and the taxi driver knew I could speak a little bit of Chinese. So we started conversing and then he started asking me some questions like, hey, how much money do you make in a month? Like, I don't know how much money do foreigners make in China. And then he even asked me if I had a mistress because he knew I was married. And he's like, oh, everyone in China has a mistress. Why don't you have one? And I'm like, okay, bro, like, let's just change topic. This is not what I'm interested in. Anyways, the point is that you may get these questions every once in a while. Also, something to be prepared for is if you go to rural areas that haven't seen foreigners, just be ready for them to either approach you or maybe ask for a photo together because you may be the first one they see and then they want to bring it back to their family and be like, look, I took a picture with a foreigner. Hey, you may even be like famous in that little town for all we know. Another thing you shouldn't do is travel without a passport. When I first got to China, I always had to bring my passport with me. Main reason is because you do get spot checked, especially if you're a foreigner just traveling around. One time I was traveling with my wife and all of a sudden the police stopped us and asked for my passport to make sure I was here legally. Not only that, whenever you check into a hotel, you must carry a passport with you because little do you know, they will register you through the local police system when you check into the hotel and show your passport. If you ever want to use the speed train or any public transportation other than the subway, you will need to bring your passport with you because you cannot buy a ticket unless you present your passport. So those are the reasons that you should definitely bring a passport. Okay, another thing that you shouldn't do is don't let taxis fool you here. Because you're a foreigner, some may try and take advantage of you. What I mean is that I've been in situations where I was in a hotel here for an event and I asked for a taxi to go to kind of a remote area that's not that popular to go to. And the taxi driver immediately was like, yeah, if you give me 70 RMB, I'll take you there. But I know that it takes maybe 20 to 30 RMB if they run the meter. So if you see that the taxi driver doesn't run the meter as soon as you get in there, ask him to run the meter or take another taxi because they're going to try and rip you off. Another situation is that you should take taxis in well-known areas like airports, hotels, and you want to avoid taking taxis at like midnight or very late or early in the morning, however you want to see it, because things can get a little dangerous there. There have been a couple stories of people hanging around at night alone and then they're ending up getting kidnapped, so you just want to avoid getting in that situation. So take authorized taxis and try not to get ripped off. Another thing is that you don't want to trust the alcohol here. What I mean is that you want to be careful what kind of alcohol you drink. I mean, I drink alcohol here every once in a while, but you just got to be careful what you choose. So some signs to determine if your alcohol is fake is if the deal is too good to be true. If you're used to drinking a Blue Moon and you know exactly how it tastes and they offer it for you for maybe 10 RMB, which is maybe $2 or $3, it's probably fake Blue Moon. Also, as soon as you try it and it tastes a little funky, it doesn't taste like it does at home, they probably added some chemicals to make it a little cheaper when they produce it. And lastly, if you get a major hangover the next day after drinking regular alcohol and not binge drinking as well, it's a pretty good sign that facility sold you fake alcohol, so you may not want to return there in the future. Okay, another thing you shouldn't do, don't travel within China during Chinese festivals. I'm going to name you 3 festivals that you should especially pay attention to whenever you decide to travel to China. So the first one, Chinese New Year. It's basically in the first 2 weeks of February, and that's where all of China pretty much gets 2 weeks off. So you can imagine that all of China is using public transportation to get where they need to go, going back to their hometowns or going to other cities to explore the rest of China. Another festival is the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is about September, mid-September to end of September. And the last one, the third one, is National Day, or you can call it Independence Day. And it's about the first week in October. The reason I say not to travel during these times is because all the public transportation is very crowded, very inconvenient. And a lot of the tickets may be sold out because what they do is that they open up public transportation tickets about a month before the Chinese festival, and then you can reserve it. If most of China's traveling, they're gonna wanna go home and it's gonna be sold out. I had an experience in Beijing where I decided to travel to the Forbidden City during the Mid-Autumn Festival, and one, it took me about 2 hours to buy tickets just to get into the Forbidden City. Two, there were so many people in there that I really couldn't enjoy the sights, and whenever I wanted to take a picture of like an artifact, there was just a huge line that it took like 30 to 40 minutes just to take a decent picture. And three, it was really hot at that time and there was no place to get shade, so I really didn't enjoy the trip, and we kind of made that tour very, very short. Another thing you should consider, don't give gifts in China. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't give gifts as a kind of sign of gratitude. Yes, do that. But you gotta be careful what you give. So I'm gonna give you a list of 5 things that you should definitely not give because it could insult the person you're giving a gift to. The first thing, don't give them clocks. Clocks in Chinese, or giving clocks in Chinese, stands for going to a funeral. So it means their time is running out and you're parting ways with them. So when you give them a clock, it's like, hey, time is ticking, you're gonna reach your deathbed, and they can really see that as an insult. Next thing, don't give them any white flowers. I mean, that is in a lot of cultures actually. You shouldn't give white flowers because it represents those in a funeral, like to kind of mourn those that are in a funeral. Another thing is giving 4 of anything, whether it's a set of 4 gifts or something with a number 4 on it, because in Chinese, 4 sounds like death. You can tell that in a lot of elevators here, when you come here, may not even have the 4th floor or the 14th floor. They just go straight from 3 to 5 or 13 to 15 because it's a bad luck number here. Next thing you shouldn't give is shoes. I know it sounds kind of weird, but shoes does sound like evil in Chinese. And when you give shoes, since it's one of the dirtiest pieces of clothing that you wear on a daily basis because you're always stomping the ground and walking around on a dirty pavement, it can be seen as an insult. The last thing you shouldn't give is sharp objects, because there's a saying in Chinese that if you cut something, it splits something in 2. So what you're saying when you give them a sharp object is that you want to part ways in their relationship. You want to cut it in 2 and you don't want to spend time with each other. Now, safe gifts that you can give to anyone in China, the first one is tea. You can't go wrong with giving them tea, especially because that's what the majority of Chinese people drink here. The second one is a souvenir from your home country. Maybe like a little, like I love New York kind of souvenir, whatever it may be. Next one is some wine, some authentic wine, not some of that fake wine we talked about earlier. Another good gift is a fruit basket that you can give to the family, like give it to the household. And the last good gift you can give, you can't go wrong with this one. It's a red packet. You pretty much fill it up with money, right? Maybe like 100 or 200 RMB, and you give it to them as a gift. This is actually commonly given throughout different Chinese festivals to all kinds of family members and friends. Another thing you shouldn't do is use chopsticks like toys. So when you come to China, be prepared to use a lot of chopsticks, especially if you don't go to the high-end restaurants that can offer utensils. Use chopsticks only for eating. Don't use your chopsticks to give a toast, like bang on the glass, seen as like beggars in the street banging on their cups so they ask for money. You don't want to impale your food, or if you have like a bowl of rice, put your chopsticks upside right, because it looks like the incense that people put in the tombstone, so it represents death. You don't want to cross your chopsticks because it's a sign of denial or rejection, that you don't want to do anything with those people, you don't want anything to do with the food, you don't appreciate it. When you're done with your meal, you can place your chopsticks on top of the bowl. That's kind of like saying, hey, I'm full, I don't want to eat anymore. And lastly, if you go to some fancy places, you may get 2 sets of chopsticks. One set would be for you to eat from your bowl. The other set would be from you to pick the food from the center of the table. They typically come in different colors, and it's pretty obvious which one is which. Next thing you shouldn't do is rely on your credit cards. So I've been in a situation where I try to invite my friends, and I was out with my wife also as well. And I'm like, hey, I'll treat you guys to this meal. As soon as it came time to paying, They couldn't accept my credit card. Actually, I tried like 2 or 3 credit cards. It's kind of embarrassing. So I had to ask my wife to pay the bill for me to make it look like that I paid the bill. But in the future, after that instance, I just made sure I had cash on me, or I just had my WeChat up and running, because WeChat Pay works like everywhere in China. So don't rely on your credit cards in the United States because they may not work. Okay, the last thing, you shouldn't venture throughout China unaccompanied. Now this is particularly for those who don't know how to speak any Mandarin, because when you go to the rural areas, a lot of them, sure, they can speak Mandarin, but there may be some that don't even speak Mandarin, that just speak their local dialect, but they do understand Mandarin. I've been to Chaozhou once, and I actually spoke to a taxi driver in Mandarin. He understood what I was saying, but his responses were in Chaozhouhua, which is their dialect, and I was like, okay, what are you saying? I can't really communicate with you. So what I mean is, if you want to go out to China, I highly recommend you have a Chinese friend, or you can look for a tour guide that you can pay maybe 200 to 600 RMB per day, and I can show you how to look for a tour guide in the description down below. And what the tour guide does is not only do they take you to the best restaurants and they can order the right food for you, but they can also take you to the historical sites and translate everything for you so that you're not lost in the middle of nowhere. Because I can guarantee it's going to be really hard to find people who speak English if you're not in a tier 1 city, and you can just get lost and it's a very uncomfortable situation. So that wraps up for the 10 things you shouldn't do in China. I also made a list of the 10 things you should bring in China, and you can look at that video right here. If you like this video or found this video useful, please hit the like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any suggestions, ideas, or comments, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Anyways, that's it, and I'll see you next time.